Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of this, is it vidcast? Video podcast? I'm Dr. Reading to Glenn White. I go by Dr. V and I am your certified credentialed transformational life coach. I help you create dynamic life plans so you can have a pathway to get the life you desire and deserve. And you hold yourself accountable, and I ask you those powerful questions to get you unstuck so you become unstoppable. All right, so getting into this episode, this is another part. This is another story that I'm talking about with my time as a college professor. I'm going to take a break from that and then start something else to talk about because my mind operates in kind of series, even though the umbrella of these episodes are really about life lessons and life coaching and things like that. I just wanted to share some things that were in my space on my heart so that I can potentially help someone else. And I started to do the order. If I didn't say this on my other videos or the other episodes, was that I had to learn how to show up fully who I am in my career before anything else had to take off. And that was a pattern that I had experienced before I became a college professor. I shared that story. So these stories, even though it's like you're going backwards, I'm sharing things that happened throughout my career because I think sometimes if you just look at certain things on social media and in society, it's like, go be an entrepreneur or, quit your job, hate that job, get out your 9 to 5 and things like that. And I was like, well, my job wasn't a 9 to 5. I actually enjoyed the freedom and flexibility I had as a college professor. I mean, that was just, I fulfilled my calling at that time. Now I've accepted that and God transitioned me to something else. But I don't think I talk about it enough. It's like, no, I showed up fully, and all the work that I did from the retreats and coaching and things like that, I did them while I was still working. And I would say, had I embraced all of that fully, the transition to becoming a full-time entrepreneur or a content creator would not have been so like a shock to my system. But anyway, go back and listen to the other episodes. I am going to talk about two things in this episode. I'll try to keep them limited. Yeah, I'm trying to keep them shorter because I know the attention span. But then at the same time, if it's something that you want to listen to, you'll listen to it, regardless of how long it takes. But I'll try to be succinct and what the message. I hope you hear a message behind. But this is more of a story, not a points. It's not like a teaching or a sermon. And I got 5 points for you. I don't. But there are a few things that happen that I want to address, and I could make them separate. But the second thing that I'm going to talk about came up because I wasn't able to sleep. And instead of me getting up and starting my day because it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I was on the gram. No, I was on the shorts. I was on the YouTube shorts. And I kept seeing, the AI is so intelligent that once you start seeing a few videos, they're like, oh, I guess you like this. So they start pushing more of those videos to you. And I went down this, I guess, rabbit hole of things. So I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about that. But the original topic was about the leadership and kind of some things that happened with my confrontation with leadership. I'm not saying I advise anyone to do these things, but I was, this is when I really started getting my voice back and understanding who I was, what I was, and how I was. So there were a few different incidents. I can't fully remember the time frames because sometimes everything is a blur and then sometimes I get the exact moments right. So I guess for this message is just talk about the incident. So I had a few interactions with leadership. And when I say leadership, I mean like the dean, provost, department chairs, interim deans, and things like that. So I'll try to go in order if I can remember them. So I talked about the whole process of tenure and promotion and how you have to get a review they say it's every 2 years. It's really every 3 semesters. And after I think my one of the reviews, oh, it had to be my second review. So I think my year, maybe my year 4, because I did my first year review, which is really my first 3 semesters. That review, I followed the instructions of one of my colleagues who I admired, and they told me to. And then they ripped that thing up. And then that was around the time when I got into, personal development and really focusing on me and uncovering some things and working through some things. So when I showed back up, again, go back and listen to the other episodes, it was like guns blazing. And I was doing some things that this is how Vernita do things. Forget Dr. Glenn White. This is Vernita showing up in all of who she was before she got this title, these positions, and the degrees, right? So I was like, I'm not going to keep taking myself down this tunnel of negativity with the student comments. So I was like, I'm not reading student comments ever again. I don't care if they're good or bad. I read the ones where I had the students when I asked them for feedback because I was like, yeah, I need you just like you want to own, keep that same energy mid semester as you would at the end of the semester. And some people say, well, that was intimidation. And I was like, man, forget that. Because until you understand how that can take a toll on you mentally, don't come to me about what I chose to do at that time. So it's like if you had something to say, if you really want to critique how I was teaching you, then you need to do it now. And of course, it was anonymous, but let's be real. I worked at a small private liberal arts university. And sometimes I had 3 students in the class, sometimes I had 12. So it wasn't that hard. But I told them, I said, I learned how not to hold things against you if this is how you feel, but make sure it's about the work. If it's about me personally, then we got a personal issue. So if you don't want me to come at you personally, then you need to keep it professional. And I was like, I can respect any critiques. Not saying that I would change anything, but if it made sense, then absolutely. But if you just don't like how I am as a person, then suck it up, buttercup, at that point. All right. So I can't remember well, I'm not allowing myself to get into the nitty gritty of the details about how this meeting came about, but I think I didn't submit something in my portfolio about student comments. And I dipped. It was the end of the semester and I wasn't returning to campus and I wasn't coming back up there to do any of that. And so my department had a problem. They felt like they couldn't accurately evaluate me because they didn't have the student comments. And so I put comments and feedback from I think I did them twice in the semester, like I think after 4 weeks and then midway. And then maybe I did my own at the end. I can't remember, but I did have student feedback, but it wasn't the comments from the system that they sent out towards the end of the year. I put the scores, so it was ranging from I think 1 to 5. So I put that you can see my scores, but the actual comments I did not include, and that caused a problem. And I stood firm. I was like, I'm not doing it. If you can't evaluate my work based on, so it goes in 3 categories: teaching, scholarship, and service. If you can't look at my teaching as far as how I develop classes, the results that I got for the students and the comments that they're actually saying, you know, or the scores, the numbers, the data, the teaching that you can see, the research, meaning the articles that I've written and got accepted, the projects that I've gone after, even though I didn't get all of them, the grants that I got, especially faculty awards, and maybe I'll talk about that, how I was able to travel out of the country multiple times on the dime of the university, and the conferences that I was accepted to, not attended, but I had to put in proposals for them to say, yes, you are worthy to come speak to our participants, and the service, what I did at the department level, at the university level, I did things outside of my department a lot. I told you I had to build allies across the university. And different innovative things that I did in the surrounding schools, if you can't judge or evaluate, well, it was judging, but if you can't evaluate me on this rubric, now it was interesting. It was like I came from rubrics and evaluations. Whole dissertation was on that number one, but even prior to that, my working as a K-12 educator and a district specialist, everything was built on rubrics because it was like, look, if you follow this, then I can't be subjective. If you, this is what it says, you see it up front, I see it. So follow that, then you get the score. So I'm using the rubric that they gave me, but I'm also using, outlines and timelines from like the University of Florida, a school that is really top tier. And I'm using their guidelines. So that means their guidelines are more rigorous than yours. So if you can't evaluate me on that and I'm following everything that you said and you'll worry about some comments, get out of here. So I remember they were like, well, we want her to come back up here. You kidding me? I ain't coming up there. And I did not. I'm like, because I'm not afraid. I work with, look, I am not afraid. What are you going to do to me? And at this time I was still tenured. So it's like, you can't fire me off of that. I mean, not, I wasn't tenured. I was on tenure track, but the way it was set up was like, you can't fire me for that. What, you going to get mad? So I didn't come back up there. And then they were like, well, you can't do it. And I said, well, they can log in and download it. And if they need that, then you do that. So they got it, but they weren't going to get it for me. And I remember the interim dean at the time, because our dean, some things happened and she had to go. I think they didn't like her because she brought in one of the biggest cohorts of like, I don't like saying faculty of color or people of color anymore, but I just can't find the right words that resonates with me. But she brought in the largest cohort of non-white faculty members, or I should say non-white American. Look, I'm just getting too tangled in the weeds. She brought in that largest cohort, and then she did some other things, and I think they were like, yeah, we got to find a way to get rid of her, and she was out. So the interim dean, I remember, I think they wrote a letter about whatever the department letter said, it got him riled up. And I did a response because you're able to do a response. Now I had there was another black professor there, and I remember in another episode I said I was probably one of their only black professors that some of these students had. Well, he had been there probably 20 years before I got there, but he was one of those that taught kind of elective courses. He was in the department, but all the students didn't have to take his classes, which was ridiculous. So they've seen him, or they may have had him for like an elective class. So they didn't have him for like a weighted class. I had him like a in major class. So I hope that makes sense. Like they had to take me. I was a gatekeeper. They had to take me. And they had to take me twice. And then the way I set myself up in certain cases, some students had to go through me 3 times. So, but that's another conversation for another day. All right. So he was like, no, you need to respond. If there's something in these letters that you're not agreeing with, you need to respond. And I had a really great department chair. And he also said, you need to respond. And I'm only writing this as objectively as I can, but these are some of the things that your colleagues have said about you, this, that, and the other. A lot of things were personal. And so I wrote a response, especially about the student comments and things that I just told you all before. If you can't evaluate me based on the rubric that you all set out and looking at these scores, then why do you need my comments? And what was shocking to them, I was able to craft a narrative of what my experience was, or the feedback and all of the things, without just on numbers. And I remember when the interim dean, it was like, he's looking for you and this, that, and the other. You did something when the leadership come out the office. And the way the campus was set up, like we were like one of the only departments on the other side of the road across the street. So he had to come down from where he was, walk down, come across the street, come into the building. So it was like, oh, he's looking for you. Word. Okay. So something was up. And I was like, I heard you've been looking for me. I do have an arrogant, cocky side of me. Some say it's confidence, but I can. I was like, I heard you're looking for me. Step into my office. I kid you not. So he sits in my office and I'm like, yeah. And it gets down to the point where I'm not changing my mind. I did what I did and I'm not changing it. And if you want it, then you go look for it. You put it in my portfolio. And I remember him sitting there amazed at, little black girl really talking to me like this? Yes, white man, I am talking to you like this. Because at this point, I had done nothing wrong. So if you know, like you know, like you know, that's a resiliency muscle that I talk about when I work with clients. If you know, like you know, like you stand firm on that. And was it scary? Absolutely. Because technically, even though I was on the tenure track, there was really nothing saying that they could keep me there, but they still needed me there at least for another year after that. That was for sure. So he was I would find the letters, but I don't think I want to take myself down that journey right now. But he was surprised that I responded to what the faculty said. And then I responded to what he said in my letter, disagreeing with him. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. And I stood firm on that. So then fast forward, we get a new dean. And at this point, so that was one interaction with leadership. Like he came to me. And then, so at this point, I was like, all right, these people really are out to get me. And I am cautious about telling people, like, everybody is not out to get you. Don't let that be the first thing. Check yourself. Always checking yourself. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you doing everything that you know that you can do? And then when you do all of that and things are still happening, yeah, they're out to get you. So in my case, yes, they were. It was a plan to get me out. And then so I knew this. Now, looking back, this was when I believe the Lord was like, yo, chick, it's time for you to really lean into this part of what I'm telling you. And that my consulting business was doing good. I was making more of my consulting business than I was as a college professor, you know. But the I'll I think I talk about that somewhere on an episode where it was an identity thing for me. It was also an ego thing for me at that point. It was like, I made it this far. I have to finish. I must get tenure or fight to the death. And it was like, God was like, all right, if that's what you want to do. And so, uh, some things happened and the consulting business shut down. Like it dried up. Those people, that's another story. But God has a way of getting you to do what he wants you to do. And it's not for those realists. It's not, yes, he gives us free will. So it's not that it's a force, but he knows, I believe, he knows the true desires of your heart. He knows the true desires of my heart. And he wasn't going to let the true desires get in the way of what he'd already planned for me to do. Now I kicked and screamed, it was delayed and all of that, but eventually he's gonna make things work. Now, can you keep bucking against the system? I believe it, absolutely. Keep resisting it, but anyway. So the next go round, I'm like, okay, I can't do this. Now it's really getting super bad for me. So I was like, either I need to transition, either get off tenure track, get out of this department. What, the math department, they want me full time to come over there, and so let's make this happen. I don't need to be in the education department. I don't even need to teach these classes. I'll teach the basics. Y'all can have it, right? So I meet with the new dean and I tell her, I said, look, before we meet, I'm going to tell you exactly what's been going down. You can go back and read all of those letters on record, their response, my response, his response, all of that. And you can see how everything has been personal. And then I think this is, I think I did another, oh, they put me on, I had to do a third year review. That's where Tom came, oh, I don't say the man name. Anyway, that's where he came in because I was mad about the third year review because you're only supposed to do a 2, a 4, and a final, which is at your 6 year. I did a 2, a 3, a 4, and it was coming up on, they wanted me to do a 5th year review. So I was like, you want me to do something every year that I don't need to do? That's where he came in. So when it was time to do the 4th year review, the actual official one, I didn't read the comments again. I didn't include the comments again. No, I did include them because I was like, fine, but I didn't read them. I did not read the comments. I was like, I am not doing this. So the first one, I didn't do the comments and it was up in the uproar. This time I included them, but I didn't read them. And I remember meeting with the new dean and my chair explaining everything. And I was like, no. And then I was like, I didn't read the comments. And then my chair looked at me. He was like, you didn't read the comments. And he was like, but you were able to speak to everything that was happening. I thought you read them. I said, that's how data works. When you look at, because again, remember the scale I told you all about, the rubric, they give you the number. And from the number, if it was a 4, common sense would say, well, look at what the 4 represented and how you were operating in your class. And then if it was a 1, you talk about that. So it's not like I fluff the data. I know how data works. And if you could see my face. So, but then I told her, I was like, look, Nudine, I need to make some changes happen. Either you're going to get me out of this department. I've already, the man in the chair of the math department, it was like we were having secret meetings on the campus. Like, y'all, it was crazy. And I told her, I said, this is what's going to happen. I can see it. So either you save me now or I don't know what to tell you. And she was, on the one hand, it was, I'm going to work with you. On the other, and then when it got close to that, some other things happened when I was trying to get this $3.5 million grant. It was a lot. She ended up saying, well, there's nothing I can do. I gave her 5, because again, in the letter, you can respond. I gave her 5 different solutions. I was like, take me off tenure track, move me out, create a liaison. I was doing so much, and I feel myself getting emotional because looking back, it was like I was begging to stay in a place that didn't want me. And I'm looking back now, I'm like, whoa, Brilliance doesn't beg. But at that time, I felt, I didn't know it at the time. At that time, I was just trying to make it work. It's like it's like being in a relationship. Like, we done told you we don't want you, but you still want to try to make it work. But I was like, I actually love teaching. I actually got really good at this. And then it was still me holding on, but I have to make tenure, even though I did not want to die at that university, because when you get tenured, you can just be there forever. I knew I wasn't going to be there forever, but it was like, it was this goal. I had to get that status by any means necessary. And it's like sometimes when you're in a relationship and it's like, but we've been in it for so long. I know he's going to just let me get the ring. Let him propose. I know we're going to get there. And it's like, whoa, baby girl, not the move. And then so I remember a couple of, different types of meetings. And I can't remember if I think I said this to her because she wanted to come on and meet with me. This was during the crisis. And I remember at that time I had not been on campus, since it happened, because I was in Singapore and I flew back in the beginning of March, and I had to take my 14 days because they kind of still didn't know what happened. And then soon as like a couple of days after I landed, everything went into major shutdown. So I didn't go back on my campus until it was time for me to leave the university. So 18 months, I did not step foot on that campus. But anyway, so I'm talking to her online via Zoom, and I'm just, in my spirit, it was just like, no, let it go. And I told her, I said, I understand you have goals and ambitions and you want to be a university president. So I understand that you have to protect yourself. I am not upset with you, but what I am upset or disappointed in the fact that I told you what was going to happen the year prior and you chose not to listen. And so don't tell me anything about wanting to support faculty of color when I gave you a way to do that. But I understand, I get it. You got to save face. And I'm not mad at you, protect you. I hope you become a university president one day. And the look on her face, I was like, is that all? And I remember at the beginning, she was like, you're so professional. And I told this to her, and I was like, well, how else would I be? What do you expect for me to do? I said, that is not a compliment. So remember that I said this. All right. So moving forward, it goes now to the provost. Now, I had worked with the provost on special projects at one point of my time there. And I like the provost, cool dude. But again, the provost got a provost in that role. And so it's like I'm not upset at these people per se. It's like I understand how this goes, but when I tell you something, listen. Or when I say, like, well, which one is it? Are you going to support and you're here for faculty, or are you trying to save face with these other people? So I remember getting on the call with him, and he says, you're so professional. I was like, you know what? Again, that is not a compliment, especially to a Black woman. Please don't go around saying that I'm so professional, because how else am I supposed to act? I said, what did you expect? And I said that to him because at this point I have no F's to give. Got none left. And so, yeah, stop that. And I remember we're chatting, and he's telling me all this stuff I don't fully remember, or I'm not allowing myself to remember, because it's like whatever. But I'm sitting there looking at him, and I was like, I'm gonna let you talk, but unless you're going to go by any of these 5 suggestions that I have, then it is what it is. And it didn't click on me that I was being fired in the moment, because I technically had 1 year left. So I didn't understand that I was being fired. And it took a year and a half for it to click. And I know you're probably thinking, well, duh, you don't have a job, but it was just the way it went down. And some of that I'm still processing, as you can still hear. But for me to actually say fired, because those weren't the words they used. I had never been fired before. I've been shifted around, or I left, or things. I got elevated to something else, but I've never been fired before, ever. So I didn't know. And I know people are saying, well, how could you? But it's just like, I didn't, it's a whole show about, I didn't know I was pregnant. I didn't know I was in a secret relationship. I didn't know I had this disease. Honestly, you don't know. Sometimes you just don't know. So I had that conversation with him, and I put him in his place. And so I'm telling you all about these times with leadership that I had. Oh, one more. Then this escaped me. I had a meeting with the former president, but I don't think it was about anything like a shakeup. But then I do remember having a meeting. It was a group of us with the president, the new president of the university, because it went back to white man. And he was a younger guy. I thought he was cool. I was like, it don't matter. I'm about to be out anyway. But we had a meeting about how Black faculty were being treated, and then how women of color were being treated. We had a whole committee, a whole task force, and he was open and listening. I won't get too much into that, because there was someone who kind of messed up the whole thing, being too emotional. And I know it's like, don't say that, because we're women, we can be emotional, but you got to manage your emotions. And I can see the growth that I've had over the years, especially in a professional environment. I was able to express everything that I felt to the provost, the dean, the interim dean, without like crying and raising my voice or talking out of turn, because I needed you to hear me. Now, I may have, cried off the call before the call, but you weren't going to get me on these calls. So in the case with when we were talking with the president, and someone sends an email out of a quick emotional response, or getting upset, and whoa, poker face. Because when you're dealing, and that's part of, and that's how to play the game. Even though I told y'all sometimes I don't like that, like just play the game, but you got to understand the rules of engagement, and you got to understand authority and titles and positions, especially when you're working in an institution like higher education. Then you're at a private institution. Then you're at a liberal arts institution. Then you're at one in the state that I'm in. So it's a lot of levels to this. So you keep yourself, you keep your composure. And unfortunately, someone derailed, and we never had that. But I did like the fact that I was able to voice on my way out. I was able to say exactly what I needed to that president. I was able to have that meeting with them. And looking back on it, I thank God for everyone doesn't get those opportunities. And I can see where I've taken a lot of that for granted, or not even for granted, but not looking at my ability to be able to get into rooms and have conversations and the skill set that it takes and just all the things that come along with that. So I'm patting myself on the back and lessons that I learned. And that's another thing that I've put in the toolbox and how I relate that to life coaching is when you're trying to get things out of people or trying to make things happen your way. And although sometimes I felt like I don't know how to help anybody in corporate because technically a lot of people don't look at higher education as corporate. But then I was like, but I've looked at it is a business. And I'm talking to the CEOs, the CFOs, and I got a lot of experience in those where someone who's an assistant professor, a young professor, a black female professor, not even in her 40s at the time, was able to navigate, negotiate, and speak to these people without cowering. Bravo to me. And I want you to be able to do that as well. All right, so that's that part. Now the second part that I'm going to talk about, yes, still in this episode, because like I said, I'm not sure. Um, I am going to take a break, so I just want to just get these out, and we'll transition, and maybe I'll come back, or I may speak something separately about this. Okay, I had to take a pause. I was like, yeah, I am going to talk about it. All right, so I was on the late night, early morning scroll, and it kept talking of there was one incident where it was I think it was a man, but nowadays people, it's a whole thing about gender and what to call biological women, not women. So I won't get into that, but I think it was a man, but he had on makeup. And he was telling the story of when I first started teaching, I had 26 kids in my class. And by day two, I had 19 because, parents took their kids out. And he was like, I don't think it's fair. Don't judge me about this, that, and the other. And then so it was a parent and the group was like, no, as a parent, I have every right to shield my child from what I don't want my child to experience and this, that, and the other. So it is my right. That's what I'm supposed to do. So there were people in the comments, and this goes to leadership also. There are people in the comments who were saying, yes, that's what good parenting does. There were days where I didn't even know my teacher's first name. And being an educator, and I was like, yes, I was very shut down and protected. Social media was around, but it wasn't like, I think that was a time where you still couldn't, everybody still couldn't really, really get on, or yeah, we didn't have, it wasn't as wide open. So it was easy to keep your secret identity. So yeah, people in the comments were like, yeah, there were times I didn't know my teacher's first name. I didn't know what their religion was, their backgrounds, their beliefs. They just came in there and taught. We had a good relationship and kept it moving. And I was like, yeah, I agree. But then I remember that there was a time in class that I was teaching, and I think things started coming out about little kids in elementary school being able to pick their gender. And some of my students who were, because now the background of the institution where I work, even though they're not quote unquote Christian, but it started off as a Southern Bible college. So a lot of people in that area still believe in, Christianity and whatever form of Christianity. I don't get into all the Episcopalian pop. I don't know, but Christianity. So, and then things had happened on the campus, where the LGBT community, things were happening, and then leadership would come out and talk about being all inclusive, this, that, and the other. And I was like, yeah, I'm here for it. I get it. Especially, teach it as an educator, because it's like, look, I'm just showing up to teach you. I'm not here to judge you or anything. And then when you get to the institution like universities, it's like, look, free will. I just need you to get this content. I hope you do well in your career. Don't harm yourself. Don't harm me. Don't harm other people. And we're out. And then we can have healthy discussions about whatever. And so one of the students was like, I just don't feel right calling a 5-year-old, and I can physically see you look like a little girl. I don't want to call you Tim or whatever the male version name, whatever. And then there was another about the pronouns. And this is so funny. Like now it was like really big. I honestly didn't think it was going to go this big. And it was like, down on the rabbit hole, it was something about MX and then using X. I don't even know, but it sounded like a foreign language to me because it was not them or they or he or she, but something with X in it. And yeah. And then the person that was watching it was like, look, grammar was already hard enough. And now you want me to take out he, she, and they and them? Come on now. So anyway, I remember the student was saying like, I am MS. Why do I have to put an MX or things like that? And I said this, I was like, well, your job is to make sure the child feels safe, and then you teach them. If that's what they want to be called, then that's what you do, and you keep it moving. If you have these strong values, then you go teach at a private school. Now, me saying that, I still, there's parts of me that, at that moment I said what I said and I believe what I said and I hold true to what I said. But then I also know that I was saying it from a place where I guess the student, I don't think you're strong enough. And this was true. I don't think you're strong. I didn't say this to the student, but there were some, I don't think you're strong enough to handle the level of backlash that would come your way. I kind of wish I said that to that student in the moment, but then it was like, no, because I've been in quote unquote in the principal's office again. So it was always a censoring. But then I'm like, people be out here saying whatever they want to say and keeping their jobs. But I think with me, it was already a target. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to say too much. But even though I do believe that, your job is to keep the students safe, if that's what's happening, then do it. But then the part that why is coming up for me today is because I want you to feel how you feel and stand behind your beliefs. And I shout out to a lot of the teachers who have lost their jobs because they were like, I refuse to go by MX or they or tell gender, especially at that young age. And they were like, my beliefs won't allow me. I believe that there are two genders. And I was like, you know what? What's more important? My beliefs and who I am at my core, or making you feel safe? And I know it's a fine line. I know it is, but I'm going to choose me as my star player. And I would, yeah, I think I would give, I don't want to say different advice, extended advice is what I would give. And it's like, if you are strong enough to go through the battle that you're probably going to face, and maybe you don't, but just in case, because some people were like, you call me Tim, even though I look like, Michelle, whatever. If you're ready to stand on who you are and fight that, by all means necessary, especially if you're not causing harm to the child. It's like we're not doing that, okay? We're not. So, yeah. And I brought that up is because sometimes, and I don't think leaders take a stand. I'll say where I stand. If I believe that there are two genders, male and female. Now, if you're choosing, like I had a student, if you want me to call you by this name, I will call, and this was at college level, I'll call you by that name, but I don't know if, well, right now, I would call the child by the name, and probably use the pronoun. So I was like, no, that's what we're doing in here. And if you don't like it, then you need to homeschool your child. Some people may not agree with that. And then so some people may say, well, how is that different from the guy who was wearing the makeup and things like that? How is that different? Because like, this is who I am. Because now you're bringing in other things that I think children should not be exposed to. Let them make their own decisions when they get older. And so I won't get too far into that. Maybe this does need to be a separate episode. All right, I'll come back to that. All of that to say is, when I talk about leadership and standing up for yourself and how I did in those conversations, the same thing I would want to tell my students in that situation is self-leadership is very important. You have to know who you are at your core, be able to stand firm on what you believe and know like you know, and don't let influences, outside factors influence who you are. You want to get to a point where you're not fully relying on anything or anyone. So although it's like, did I have another job lined up after that? No. But at the same time, I would feel good just not having the job if I had to see myself in a position where I'm begging. And I know that's easier said than done, but can you imagine getting yourself to the point where you're solid on who you are, and whatever happens, then at least you can stand firm and you can truly sleep at night. Now, I did sleep at night when I told that student what I said, because in the moment that's what it was. But now it's like I would add to, you stand true to who you are regardless of a position, a title, a status, an institution. And that takes a lot of courage. All right. I'm going to end that there. Let me know what came up for you. Thank you so much for listening and learning with me. If you have any comments or thoughts, please put them down below. This is a dialogue, even though right now is only one way we communicate down in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts and what you're thinking about this series so far. Let me know. If you want to connect with me, that information will be down in the box. Go to drberniceglenn-white.com/work with me, or if you want to check out any of the resources I have, you can go to drberniceglenn-white.com/resources, or if anything changed, it will be updated down in the description box. Thank you so much, and remember, the world needs you to be well, to be empowered, to be bold, and to be brilliant. Until next time, bye.